I found 2 armed USDA inspectors standing in the middle of my vineyard at sunrise. Problem is, I wasn't on their inspection list. Not even close. 3 days later, drones appeared over my house. Then came the surprise compliance audits, and a regional supervisor named Harlan who swore he had federal jurisdiction over my land. So I set a trap, one built precisely for his ego. And when Harlan showed up screaming, slicing open a bag he swore was full of banned chemicals, it exploded right in his face. That's when the handcuffs finally came out. Sunrise has a particular way of touching my land. Slow, warm, almost apologetic, like it's stepping softly through the vines so it doesn't wake anything before its time. That morning was no different. The sky was a quiet wash of gold, and the rows of Cabernet leaves shimmered with dew that looked like someone had dusted the world with broken glass. It was peaceful, the kind of peaceful a man learns not to take for granted once he's lived long enough. I had just finished tightening the trellis wire along the south row, listening to the soft crackle of dry earth waking under my boots, when I caught something out of place. A shape, 2 shapes actually, dark silhouettes standing dead center in my vineyard as if they owned the place. At first, I thought they were hikers lost off the trail or maybe some early morning photographers. But hikers don't move like that. Slow, methodical scanning, as if they're clearing corners. And photographers don't carry sidearms or clipboards stamped with federal seals. I froze there for a moment, one hand resting on the post, letting my eyes adjust. 2 men, matching uniforms, forest green jackets, khaki tactical pants, boots polished too clean for field work. They had guns on their hips, not standard-issue police sidearms, but those awkward polymer holsters USDA inspectors use when they're trying too hard to look official. On their sleeves, a rectangular patch with the seal of the United States Department of Agriculture. And beneath it, in bold embroidered letters, Federal Agricultural Compliance Division. I almost laughed. Instead, my jaw tightened, because the FACD office sits 2 counties over. They're not supposed to be anywhere near my vineyard unless I request an audit, or unless they're investigating a reported violation. And I sure as hell hadn't requested anything. I stepped forward, boots crunching softly in the dirt. The 2 inspectors finally turned as if noticing me for the first time. One lifted a clipboard. The other adjusted his belt like he wanted me to see the gun he probably wasn't certified to carry. "Morning," the tall one said. Square jaw, mirrored sunglasses, hair trimmed military short. Except his stance was wrong. Too rigid, too rehearsed. A man might have read it as confidence. I read it as someone trying to look like something he wasn't trained to be. "What are you doing on my land?" I asked. The tall one smiled the way someone smiles when they think paperwork protects them. "Routine compliance survey," he said, tapping the USDA badge on his chest. "Part of the updated Federal Oversight Initiative." I stood there a second, letting the words settle like ash. "This land isn't under any current USDA review," I said. "Never has been. Never will be without written notice." The 2 inspectors exchanged a look. Not the embarrassed kind, no, it was the kind men share when they think the person in front of them doesn't understand how the system works. The tall one cleared his throat. "Your property borders a protected agricultural reserve," he said. "That grants us perimeter jurisdiction for environmental safety checks." "Perimeter jurisdiction?" I repeated. "Is that what they're calling trespassing these days?" His smile faded, but his partner stepped forward, tapping a button on his chest like he was activating a body cam. Except the body cam was off-brand, strapped on crooked, and blinking a red light that meant it wasn't recording at all. These men weren't field inspectors. They were actors who didn't know their lines. Something old stirred in me, something I thought I'd hung up years ago. The part of me that used to walk into rooms full of people lying to my face and had to figure out which one was going to make the evening news. I didn't introduce myself, didn't tell them who I used to be, didn't need to. I simply pointed toward the gravel drive. "Out," I said. The tall one blinked, surprised I wasn't playing along. "Sir." Refusal to cooperate with a federal. "Out." This time sharper. Final. He opened his mouth again, but I stepped forward first. One slow step, the kind that says the conversation just ended. Both men hesitated. Then finally, they turned and walked off my property, muttering something about non-compliance and documentation. When they reached the road, they paused, waiting to see if I'd look away. I didn't. Not until they were gone. I exhaled slowly. In my lifetime, trouble rarely announces itself with sirens. It arrives quietly. Soft steps, forced smiles, men pretending to be something they're not. And as the sun rose over the treetops, warming the tops of the vines, I couldn't shake the feeling that those two weren't the beginning of something. No, they were the warning. The first ripple before the storm. I didn't expect to see those USDA inspectors again. Not so soon, at least. But trouble doesn't like to travel alone. It brings friends. And it brought me one in particular. 2 days after that little routine compliance survey, I was repairing a wooden brace near the front gate when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Slow. Heavy. Too heavy for a sedan. Too slow for delivery trucks. That left one thing. Someone trying to look important. I straightened up, wiped the dust off my palms, and watched an aging government-issue Suburban crawl to a stop just outside my property line. The engine stayed running. The driver's door opened with that tired, grown, older American SUVs make when they've carried too many miles and too many egos. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, built like someone who used to be in shape and hadn't accepted the calendar yet. Aviator sunglasses, beige USDA jacket, the kind that's supposed to look authoritative but only works if the man wearing it has the spine to match. This one didn't. He didn't look at my vineyard first. He looked at me, the kind of look a man gives when he's deciding whether to go with intimidation or skip straight to domination. He walked toward the gate with slow, purposeful steps. Halfway there, I noticed his right hand hovering near his hip every few strides. Old habit. Law enforcement habit. Except the way he held it, too high, too stiff, was wrong. Like someone mimicking a posture they only half remembered. "Morning," he said, stopping just short of the fence. His voice was gravel dipped in bourbon. I nodded. "Help you with something?" He smiled. A thin, crooked smile that didn't reach his eyes. The kind you practice in a rearview mirror before trying it out on the world. "Name's Harlan Pierce," he said. "Regional USDA Agricultural Compliance Supervisor." I didn't respond, just looked at him, letting the title hang in the air long enough for him to taste how ridiculous it sounded in this setting. "Regional Supervisor," I repeated, expression flat. "That's something they print on business cards?" A barely visible twitch hit the corner of his jaw. A hit, a small one, but enough. He cleared his throat. "Your vineyard borders a protected agricultural buffer zone that places you under extended federal oversight in the event of a potential environmental risk." There it was again, the jurisdiction nonsense. The favorite word of men who no longer have any. "My land isn't part of any buffer zone," I said. "Not federal, not state, not even county. You can check the boundary lines." "I have," he said, resting a heavy hand on my gate like he might push it open if he felt inclined. "And you're close enough that anything happening here affects federally protected land. Which means I have the authority to inspect, enter, and verify operations as needed." I stared at his hand gripping my gate. "That gate doesn't open for titles," I said. "Only for warrants." A flicker of anger sharpened his eyes. "You refusing an official USDA inspection?" he asked. "I'm refusing a man playing federal cowboy on land that isn't his." His jaw clenched. He pushed his sunglasses up onto his forehead, revealing pale, intense eyes. Not just angry, unstable. The kind of unstable that grows roots in resentment and watered-down authority. "I'm trying to keep things safe," he said. "Safe for who?" I asked. He didn't answer. He turned and walked back to his Suburban, climbing in with a final grunt. The door slammed. The engine revved. Gravel spit behind him as he sped off faster than a man needing to prove a point should. I stood there for a long moment, hands on the gate. I had dealt with men like Harlan before. Men who don't just wear authority. They need it. Men who can't stand being ignored. Can't stand being told no. Men who see independence as a challenge. And deep in my bones, I felt it. Harlan Pierce wasn't finished with me. Not by a long shot. He didn't come back the next day. He didn't have to. Men like him don't knock twice. They let the echo do the work. 2 mornings after his visit, I saw the first sign of escalation. I was tightening the hinge on my workshop door when a county sheriff's cruiser rolled slowly up my driveway. A real one this time. Not the fake federal swagger Harlan wore like a cheap costume. The sight of law enforcement didn't bother me. I'd worked with plenty of them over the years. But the way this officer stepped out with his shoulders already sagging told me this wasn't a social call. He adjusted his hat, cleared his throat, and said, "We got a report about a possible chemical storage violation on the premises." I stared at him. "On my premises?" He nodded apologetically. "Caller said you had unregistered pesticides stored in public view." I almost asked if the caller's name rhymed with Harlan, but the officer looked uncomfortable enough already. I led him to the shed, pointed through the window. Inside, neatly labeled, legal, state-approved materials. Locked, shelved, documented. He took one look. "Yeah," he muttered. "That's not a violation at all." "I know." He apologized again, filed the complaint as a non-issue, and drove off, embarrassed on behalf of someone else. It happened again 48 hours later. This time the call was about strong chemical odors drifting into the community. Chemical odors. On a vineyard. In harvest season. Same officer. More apologetic than before. He ran a hand over his face like he was trying to rub away secondhand stupidity. "Look," he said. "Somebody's messing with you." I nodded. "I have a pretty good guess who." He didn't ask. He didn't need to. He left slowly, his tires cutting long lines through the dust. I watched him go, feeling the familiar weight of someone else's obsession pressing against my land. Because men like Harlan don't irritate. They escalate. And escalation rarely arrives loudly. Creeps. In shadows where shadows shouldn't be. In footprints near fence lines. In vehicles parked too long on roads without names. In neighbors suddenly looking at you with stories someone else fed them. The USDA wasn't inspecting me. It was hunting me. And I knew exactly who was pointing the spear. There's a particular kind of silence a property holds when it's being watched. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that tastes like metal on the tongue. The kind that makes the hairs on your arms lift even when the air is still. By the end of that week, that silence had settled over my vineyard like frost. It started with a flicker, a glint of sunlight off something that shouldn't have been there. I was walking the east road just after sunset, the sky a thin smear of amber across the ridge, when I saw it high up on a utility pole. Tiny metallic blink. I stopped, tilted my head. There it was again. A twinkle like a misplaced star. But stars don't come with mounting brackets. I walked slowly toward it, boots whispering over gravel. Rage makes you sloppy. I wasn't sloppy. Up close, that star resolved into a small, outdoor-rated bullet camera, mounted higher than any homeowner, inspector, or sane human would bother climbing. Industrial screws. Fresh cable stapled down the pole. And on the side, a sticker. USDA Environmental Sentinel Program, Property Monitoring Device. What a joke. I didn't touch it. Didn't yank it down. Didn't give whoever installed it the satisfaction. Instead, I climbed the fence rail, pulled out my phone, and photographed the serial numbers etched into the bracket. Then the wiring path. Then the angle. Old habits. Old instincts. Evidence first. Emotion later. On the way back to the house, a breeze stirred the western trees. Just enough to shift a branch and reveal something else. A second camera, smaller, tucked into the foliage like a guilty secret. This one pointed directly at my porch. That one wasn't official. Too cheap. Too crooked. Harlan's taste, no doubt. I didn't have to guess who installed it. The angle was perfect. Not too wide, not too narrow. Placed at exactly the height a man with delusions of tactical genius would think was optimal. I stood under it. Stared straight into the lens. Let whoever was watching feel me looking back. Most people hate being watched. But watchers? They hate being seen. The third camera appeared the next day. disguised as a wildlife tracker. Only wildlife cameras aim at deer trails, not at patios where a man drinks his morning coffee. 3 cameras, then 4, then 5. 5 blinking amber eyes staring into my life, watching every move, recording every breath the vines took. I made a ritual of it. Every night at 9, I sat on my porch with a mug, sometimes coffee, sometimes wine, staring calmly into the lenses. No fear, no flinch, just quiet defiance. By Thursday, I knew Harlan was watching live feeds somewhere. Maybe in a government office, maybe in his garage, surrounded by empty coffee cups and the ghosts of authority he used to have. Good. Let him watch. Later that night, I pulled up my router logs. Old detective habits die harder than the men who taught them. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Outdoor lights, home server, my phone. But buried in the list was a device with a MAC address I didn't recognize. Unlabeled, unknown, silent. It had connected at precisely 2:14 a.m. The night before at 2:16 a.m. The night before that at 2:13 a.m. Consistent, patterned. Someone testing doors before breaking windows. Amateurs snoop out of curiosity. Professionals snoop for control. Harlan was confused enough to think he was both. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the soft hum of the server and the distant rustle of vines brushing one another. Somewhere in that darkness, behind a monitor and a badge he wanted back, someone was watching. Let them. Watchers always reveal more than the watched. But the cameras were just the beginning. The mail started next. Folded flyers slipped into my box. USDA warnings printed on thick cardstock, stamped with the same agricultural compliance seal the inspectors wore that morning. Unregistered chemical storage detected. Suspicious soil composition irregularities. Unreported livestock presence potential. Livestock. On a vineyard. I laughed so hard the first time I nearly choked. Then the neighbors started acting strange. People who'd waved for 10 years suddenly crossed the street early. Dog walkers slowed their pace near my property. A couple even pointed, not discreetly, toward my vines before whispering to each other. Someone was painting a story about me, and they were painting it fast. By the time I found the footprints near my fence, fresh, heavy, pointing inward, I knew this wasn't random harassment. This was a plan. Deliberate, coordinated, targeted. And the man behind it didn't want compliance. He wanted control. That night, just past midnight, I checked my cameras again. Everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't settle, it waits. Around 1:40 a.m., a shadow moved across the far row of vines. Slow, controlled, low to the ground. Someone creeping, thinking they were invisible. I didn't turn on the light. Didn't shout, didn't grab a weapon. Let them think they were clever. By the time I reached the fence line, the shadow was gone. A ghost slipping into the trees. But he'd left something behind. Wedged into the casing of my exterior camera was a small black USB stick. Cheap plastic. No label. The kind of thing people think looks anonymous when they've watched too many TV shows. I didn't touch it with my fingers. A pen under the edge. A cloth underneath. A slow drop into safety. Back inside, I plugged it into my old investigation laptop. The one with no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, air-gapped, secure. The screen lit up, and there it was. Malware. Crude but dangerous. Code designed to disable cameras, divert feeds, overwrite recordings, stream footage to a third-party server. Sloppy enough to expose itself. Aggressive enough to cause real damage. Egotistical enough to be Harlan's. Most people would have deleted it. Reset the system. Called a lawyer. But men like Harlan don't understand boundaries. They only understand consequences. And fury makes them sloppy. So instead of shutting the door, I opened it wider. A trap began forming in my mind. Clean, elegant, irresistible. A trap built for a man like Harlan. A man who couldn't resist the chance to catch someone else breaking rules. A man who hadn't realized that he, not me, was the real criminal, and I was going to let him prove it. The thing about men like Harlan is simple. They don't stop. Not when you ignore them. Not when you warn them. Not when you tell them to get off your land. Men like him only understand one lesson. The one they teach themselves by walking straight into a trap they believe they're too smart to fall for. And that's exactly what I plan to give him. The next morning, I began staging the scene. I didn't go big. Big looks fake. I went subtle. Subtle is irresistible. Behind the shed, I stacked a few crates. Not neatly, not sloppily. Enough to look like a man trying to hide something, but not enough to make it obvious. Then I laid out 3 canvas bags, large, heavy, sealed tight. Inside, nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, nothing even remotely questionable. Just powdered yeast nutrients, ground limestone, and high-grade organic fertilizer. All used legally in winemaking. All white as snow under the right light. When piled into an unlabeled bag, they didn't look harmless, they looked suspicious. And suspicious was all a man like Harlan needed to lose his mind. I positioned one of my own security cameras, intentionally slightly crooked, so it captured just enough of the shed area to spark curiosity but not enough for clarity. Then I called Toby, my Vineyard assistant. Smart kid. Strong. Loyal. And with enough common sense to keep his mouth shut when something feels off. "What do you need?" he asked, stepping out of his truck. "Help me move these bags," I said. "And don't ask questions." He didn't. At sunset, the vines glowing with that soft orange light only harvest season brings, we made sure the hacked camera had a perfect angle. Then we played it out. I lifted one of the bags and said, clearly, casually, like a man slipping up on a secret, "Make sure these go before sunrise. We don't want anyone asking questions about that white powder." Toby caught on instantly. He nodded, whispering, "Got it, boss. No one will see a thing." Perfect. Not overacted. Not too quiet. Just enough. Actors with real experience know the trick. Don't aim for Hollywood. Aim for paranoia. And paranoids do the rest of the work themselves. We moved the bags slowly, deliberately, keeping everything just inside the camera's field. Then we shut the shed and walked away. The trap was set. At exactly 12:43 a.m., the hacked camera connection flickered. Bingo! That same unknown MAC address connected to my system. Then stayed connected. Longer than before. 7 minutes. 10. 14. Someone was watching. And they were watching like a starving man watches a locked bakery. Harlan had taken the bait. The next morning, I stepped outside to the crisp smell of early fall grapes and the heavy quiet only predators create when they think they're stalking prey. Around noon, I saw the first shadow. A white USDA truck parked down the road. Too far to justify authority. Too close to pretend coincidence. Harlan was different today. I could feel it in the air. He had convinced himself he'd uncovered something big. Something that would justify every trespass, every camera, every harassment report. Something that would make him feel like a federal agent again, not a bureaucrat barely clinging to relevance. And men who crave authority more than truth, they become dangerous when they think they finally have evidence. He wanted to win. I wanted him to try. That night, just after 11 p.m., I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring at the blinking cameras like they were old friends playing cards. The vineyard wind whispered through the rows, shifting leaves like hands shuffling a deck. At 10:47 p.m., I heard it. Not on the porch. Not the front door. Not even the gate. A knock on the side gate, the one no one uses unless they're lost or scared. I set my mug down, walked toward it, opened the door. A figure stood just beyond the fence. A man shaking, eyes darting, breathing fast. Pastel USDA polo. Clipboard under his arm. Not Harlan. It was Baker, one of the lower-level field techs I'd seen hovering around the USDA truck earlier. Thin, sweaty, constantly anxious. The kind of man who folds easily when pressure changes direction. He swallowed hard. "Can we talk?" he whispered. I studied him. He wasn't here to posture. He wasn't here to intimidate. He was here because his fear had finally outrun his obedience. I opened the gate and motioned him in. "What's going on?" I asked. He looked behind him twice before answering. "They're going too far," he said, voice trembling. "Harlan, the regional office, the whole damn division. You don't understand what's happening." I raised an eyebrow. "Then explain." He clenched his hands nervously. "It started as a pilot program," he said. "New oversight model. But Harlan, he twisted it. He's been watching you for weeks. Monitoring. Recording. He has a whole setup in his garage." Garage. Of course. Authority fantasies always start in garages. "What kind of setup?" I asked. Baker swallowed again, sweat shining under the porch light. "Screens," he whispered. "Dozens of them. Hard drives. Logs. Maps. And files on you. Ones he wasn't supposed to make." "What kind of files?" "Everything." His voice cracked. "Your routines. Your supply shipments. Your soil reports. Even your visitors. He thinks you're hiding something." "What does the USDA think?" I asked. He shook his head violently. "They don't know. Not officially. Harlan's been running his own operation. Off the books." And then he did something unexpected. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, creased, damp from sweat, and handed it to me like it was radioactive. "What's this?" I asked. "A login," he whispered. "Internal cloud storage. Supervisor level. You didn't get it from me." I unfolded it. A username, password, a directory path labeled Federal Agricultural Compliance, Private Evidence Archive. I looked at him. "Why bring this to me?" He trembled. "Because he's not stable," Baker said. "And he told me today he's going to force an incident. Something to prove you're a danger. Something to justify intervention." The night wind shifted through the vines like a warning sigh. "Go home," I told him. "Act normal. And never come back here." He nodded frantically, stepping backward through the gate as if retreating from fire. "Good luck," he whispered. Then he ran down the road, swallowed by darkness. I unfolded the paper again. A key, a confession, a match waiting for a fuse. Harlan wasn't just watching me. He was preparing something. And now I finally had the thread I needed to unravel him. All I had to do was pull. I've been raided before. Real raids. Federal warrants. Danger so thick you could chew the air. Those nights had rhythm, shouts, boots, adrenaline chasing common sense. But this raid didn't start with noise. It started with stillness. A quiet so unnatural the vines themselves seemed to hold their breath. I was hosting a small evening barbecue under the arbor lights. 12 people at most, all longtime clients or friends. Blues music drifted from the speakers. Ribs sizzled on the grill. The vineyard glowed under the warmth of lantern light. It was the kind of night that felt like a reward for surviving everything the world throws at you. Then the lights came, red and blue, bursting through the vines like lightning cracking open the sky. 2 sheriff cruisers first. Then a black USDA tactical van grinding down my driveway, kicking up a storm of gravel. The music died. Conversations froze. My guests looked like statues carved out of fear. I stayed still. The vehicles slammed to a stop. Doors flew open. Officers poured out wearing tactical vests and grim expressions like they were expecting a meth lab explosion at any second. A young sheriff deputy stepped forward, voice trembling. "Sir, we received a federal tip about illegal chemical storage and potential hazardous materials operations." Behind him, the side door of the USDA van slid open. And there he was, Harlan Pierce, stiff, red-faced, sweating through his beige USDA jacket like a man about to deliver the victory moment he had rehearsed in his bathroom mirror. He pointed straight at me. "That's him," he shouted. "He's hiding restricted chemicals. I saw the evidence myself." I raised my hands slightly, not surrender, just clarity, and said, "Officer, unless you're here for ribs and a glass of reserve, you've been lied to." My guests snorted out nervous laughs. But the young deputy wasn't who mattered, because pushing past the line of officers came Detective Moreno, Andy. Smart, steady, a man whose brain worked faster than his badge. His eyes scanned the scene, the people, the food, the total lack of chaos. Then he saw me. "Derek," he said sharply. "What the hell is going on?" I didn't answer. Instead, I looked at Harlan. He couldn't wait. He actually sprinted, toward the stack of covered bags behind my shed. The bags I had intentionally staged. The bags he had watched obsessively through the hacked camera feed. Believing he'd uncovered something criminal, he shoved 2 officers aside, shouting, "It's in here. I saw him hiding it. Open the bags." "Harlan, stop," I barked. Too late. He grabbed a box cutter from his belt, jammed the blade into the top of the nearest canvas bag, and slashed downward with all his weight. The bag erupted. A massive cloud of fine white powder blasted straight into his face, coated him from hair to boots, covered his mouth, his eyes, every crease of his once authoritative jacket. He stumbled back, coughing violently, choking on yeast nutrients and pulverized limestone. Behind me, I heard a guest whisper, "He looks like a powdered donut," across my arms. "Careful, Harlan," I said. "That's premium fermentation yeast. Breathe too much and you'll start rising like bread dough." Laughter rippled through the officers. Even the sheriff deputy cracked a smile. Harlan didn't. His eyes went wild. His face twisted with humiliation and fury. "Arrest him!" he screamed, voice cracking. "He's hiding chemicals. I saw it. I saw the footage." Andy's expression darkened. "What footage?" he asked. Harlan froze. A moment too long. A fraction too hesitated. Andy stepped forward, tone sharp. "Harlan, how would you have access to this man's private security feed?" Silence. Thick, damning, suffocating. 2 deputies stepped closer to him. Not aggressive, but ready. "That's a felony," Andy said quietly. "Multiple felonies." Harlan stammered. I had authorization. Emergency oversight. Federal jurisdiction." "No," Andy said. "You didn't." He nodded to his officers. "Cuff him." 2 deputies grabbed Harlan's arms. He thrashed, powdered yeast puffing off him like cheap fireworks. "You don't understand," he howled. "I'm the supervisor. I'm in charge." "You were," Andy said. "Now you're under arrest." As they dragged him across my vineyard, he looked less like an official and more like a defeated clown. Dusted white, eyes frantic, choking on his own obsession. My guests finally exhaled. One of them whispered, "Holy hell!" But this wasn't over. Not yet. Because Harlan wasn't acting alone, and the person above him was about to learn their day of reckoning had arrived. The fall. News travels fast in rural towns. Scandal travels faster. By the next morning, everyone knew a USDA supervisor had been hauled off my land covered in white powder. But they didn't know why. I intended to correct that. I didn't go to the sheriff's office. I didn't go to the USDA field office. No, I took the truth straight to the people. At sunrise, I set up a small table at the entrance to my vineyard, exactly where the USDA vehicles had parked hours earlier. On that table, I laid out my printed evidence. Hacked router logs, serial numbers from the cameras, screenshots of unauthorized access, hard copies of emails Baker leaked, financial transfers between Harlan and regional administrators, soil complaints plotted to match surveillance installation dates. Neighbors gathered. Reporters came. Even county officials wandered over when they smelled a story burning hotter than August asphalt. I didn't shout. I didn't rant. I simply held up the first page. "Harlan wasn't inspecting my land," I said. "He was surveilling it. Illegally. For weeks." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I flipped to the next sheet. "And this," I held up the financial record, "is the man who paid him to do it." The crowd went silent. Dead silent. Dr. Evan Mercer, regional USDA director. He'd signed off on every illegal camera, every warrantless access, every falsified complaint. The reason? Not safety, not compliance, not environmental concern. Land. My land. They wanted a piece of my acreage for a federal expansion contract. They just needed a pretext to seize it. And the trap they set, I said, lifting the last document, They walked right into it. Within 6 hours, the USDA Inspector General opened a formal investigation. Mercer was placed on immediate leave. Harlan remained in county jail without bail. Federal agents seized Harlan's garage servers. Every camera within a mile of my vineyard was removed. Justice doesn't always arrive quickly, but when it does, it tends to travel in convoys. The end, and what comes after. 6 months later, my vineyard was back to normal, or maybe quieter than normal. Peaceful. Honest. Mine again. The court case was swift. Harlan pleaded guilty. Mercer tried to fight it. The evidence buried them both. Conspiracy, wiretapping, abuse of authority, attempted land seizure, tampering with private systems, unauthorized surveillance on civilians. The judge didn't go easy. Harlan got 17 years. Mercer got 22, both without parole. And as the final gavel hit the wood, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Silence. The good kind. The kind made of wind through vines, not drones overhead. The kind that tastes like clean air, not fear. The kind that belongs to a man who fought back and won. That night, under the warm glow of arbor lights, I raised a glass with friends, neighbors, even a few of the deputies who'd witnessed the madness firsthand. To freedom, I said. To boundaries, someone added. And to never letting small men pretend to be big heroes. Another laughed. Glasses clinked. The sound rang through the vines like a bell. I took a sip of my best vintage, the one from the summer before all this happened. Tasted like victory, like peace, like land finally left alone.